Welcome to Check In with Jason Lauritsen, where we explore how to create human, connected workplaces that employees love and that fuel organizational success. Each week, I invite someone who's leading the way in this work to join me for a conversation to both educate and inspire us. Today's guest is Ross Hecox. Ross is the Chief People Officer for Synergy ECP. With over 20 years in talent management and organizational development, Ross has built a reputation as a people-centric leader who blends HR expertise, innovative founder drive, and people-focused leadership to create workplaces that thrive. Synergy ECP was recently named one of the top 100 most inspiring workplaces in North America, which, fun fact, is where Ross and I met because I was there to MC and hand out some hardware. Really fun event. And so it was fun to see you get recognized for your hard work. So Ross, thanks for being here. Thanks for agreeing to join me.
Yeah, Jason, thank you so much for having me. And I really appreciate the introduction. The introduction in and of itself was even inspiring for me. So thank you.
That's awesome. Well, I'm glad here to help. It's all about you. You do good work. I just read it back to you. It feels good. So
yeah, I appreciate that.
Well, let's get to know a little bit more about you. And I'd love to just start generally with, can you share a little bit more about the work you do and your organization, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So here at Synergy ECP, I'm the Chief People Officer, which is probably just the more modern term for CHRO and human resources in this day and age. Our focus is a little bit unique. Synergy ECP supports the intelligence community. So three-letter agencies you might hear about in movies, on TV programs, and it feels very clandestine and there's always some spy component to it. That's the world that we live in, and our focus is really on the technical side of the solutions for those organizations. My role really oversees, the HR side of things, is talent acquisition, talent management, and also the marketing side of the house. Our people are our product. So the majority of the marketing that we do is really recruitment marketing focused. So that falls underneath of me as well, which I actually very much enjoy.
It is kind of fun work.
Yes.
That the branding and advertising, whatever, I always found that to be kind of a fun addition to the other kind of blocking and tackling that
That's
you do
right.
in talent.
The storytelling and yes, absolutely.
So I always like to ask people how you found your way into this line of work, because it's always interesting, people's origin stories on their way into HR leadership roles. So how did you get into it?
Yeah, I'm not sure that I got into this work. I think the work got into me, Jason. From a very early age, I realized that helping others was something that I was drawn to. Again, a very early age, and the progression of that through life. That's the elementary version of how I got into this work. But as I grew up, so to speak, and appreciating, number one, the mission, which I was also born into. My parents and step-parents all worked for the mission. Back then, we could only say DOD. They couldn't use the name of the agencies and things of that nature. So that part of it was fascinating. I grew up in Australia because part of the mission was there. So I had that cultural experience and the connection to the mission and what was going on. I spent some time in the Army. The patriotism aspect, national security, things of that nature was really inspiring to me. So as I grew up and cut my teeth on the recruiting side of the house, so I think a similar journey that you had, I grew up in an agency, a boutique agency environment, and very quickly realized that I wasn't very good at headhunting. And I think the epiphany for me was it didn't feel altruistic. It felt very much like you're headhunting. And I think, careers are not something that you mess around with. You want to make sure that you're aligning people's goals and interests and higher self to work. I think that's the really important part, of the story of what we do from an HR or people team oriented perspective.
Yeah, that you're right. It certainly is similar path, that the agency, like you're either cut out for that or you're not. And it is like that. The transactional nature of that was always felt a little shallow to me, especially if you want to have a bigger impact, right? If you do care about the experience or you want to sort of see the organization succeed. I just felt like the toolkit was really limited, and one transaction isn't going to necessarily change the trajectory of any particular company. And I wanted to have a bigger impact than that, I think.
Yeah, that's right. And that's where, my springboard, about 3 years on that side, went off into the corporate side of the house. And then there was still this, this learning experience and epiphany that you have there where you're saying, okay, cool. I believe in the mission of this company. But there's also leaders within this organization that I don't necessarily agree with. I don't think they're prepared to be in the positions that they're in. And yet I'm still bringing people into this organization to work under leadership that, lacks, I'd say, maybe the training and development needed to be a successful leader and grow people and all of those things. So that's kind of the trajectory that has led me to where I am today is the increasing, I'll say, responsibility to control and direct those opportunities and solutions.
Yeah, create an environment that is good for people, safe for people, where they can get the development they need and want.
That's right.
And that. I love that. What do you love most about the work you get to do today?
I think it's and as cliche as it's going to sound, Jason, I think it is the people aspect of things. And I'm not just talking about, people's hobbies and interests and surface level realities. I really love helping people discover and uncover what it is that drives and motivates them, how to uncover and define their values, how to live by their values, what those actually mean. The side of the house where, again, from a technical perspective, being in a technical environment, the majority of people that we hire and that are, in engineering positions are male. And men tend to have a very, kind of closed off mindset on growth and vulnerability and all of the things associated with that growth mindset. So helping people uncover for themselves, how their past experiences have shaped who they are today, what motivates them, why they're motivated towards these types of things, and removing maybe some of the, the narratives that they've created over their lifetime to help them be, better stewards of the mission and those that they may lead or work around and so on and so forth.
Yeah, that's meaningful work, and I'm excited that you are doing it, especially through the lens or kind of what you talked about there, because I have a soft spot in my heart or a compulsion, I think, towards the same thing of kind of elevating and unlocking men to travel the world differently, right? To embrace a different sort of view on masculinity, and that it includes vulnerability and emotional awareness and all those things. That's powerful work that you're doing from that seat.
Yeah, thanks. And that is the love part.
Sure.
And that is the, what expression should I use here? I guess the labor of love part, because there are definitely people that, they hear these types of things and they run for the hills. So it's trying to pull them back in. Yeah.
Yep. No, that's important work. Thank you for doing that work.
You betcha.
So there's a famous quote that I will say a lot, and it has been true for me. At least it feels very true in my experience. That is, necessity is the mother of invention.
Yes.
And I feel like this kind of describes your work in the situation that you're in. And I was really compelled by this when you and I met and talked kind of about the work that you're doing, and you shared with me some of the constraints that you're up against, which I was like, okay, this is a different world that we can certainly learn from. And so I'd like to start by having you share what it looks like, sort of what some of those constraints are when you are a federal contractor, particularly a federal contractor to the kinds of agencies that you work with. What are I'd love for you to share kind of what are the limitations and the obstacles that you face in, what we would consider core HR work, like fostering connection with employees and making them feel sort of part of something and sort of having open communication. Could you share what that looks like? Because I find this really challenging, I guess, is the word.
Yeah. I think challenging is probably the most diplomatic term we could use here. And it's probably also a part of what I love, Jason, and that's, the puzzle and solving for the puzzle in ways maybe that others aren't thinking about it. So when you talk about the things that keep people up at night, this is the thing that keeps people up at night. So imagine you have, let's say, 36 different customers. Your employees are deployed with these 36 different customers. They're not under your roof, they're under their roof. So now you have these people spread across essentially 36 different cultures that they're working in on a daily basis. Each environment has its own cultural dynamic, and essentially the experience that your employee is having is the experience of the work that they're doing on that particular program or contract. Okay. That dynamic, and I'll even complicate it even further. So 36 different programs, 36 different cultures. Now you factor in employees, and employees, we have over 200 employees that also have, 200 different ideas of the things that they need in their life to feel content and purposeful and having an impact and all of those things, right? So you start adding all of this up and you're like, okay, wow, they're not under our roof. In some cases, they're a team of one within a team of 60, 70, 80. They don't have any immediate daily connection to another team member, a Synergy ECP team member. These environments restrict cell phones. They restrict internet usage. They restrict any devices, recording devices. And sometimes they're in, old basement type facilities. So getting to the point of understanding and appreciating each individual's unique needs and the needs of that program and culture, and tying it back to the organization and the things that we want to do as a company to help them grow as human beings. That's the reality of the work that we're solving for. And it's a super, super complicated set of circumstances that requires a lot of creativity, thought, experiments. You have to take more of an agile approach to these things to see what's working and what isn't, and constantly evolve.
When I've thought about, since our conversation, I've thought about this many times. It's like, I talk to HR leaders and other, leaders all day long, and it's, you hear about all the challenges they're facing, and it's like, okay, imagine those challenges, except, you have employees spread across all these different cultures. You have no ability to control day-to-day experience.
Right. Yeah.
You can't communicate with them during work hours in any way that is meaningful. There's all these variables that normally are the things that we're spending all day long thinking about, trying to manage, trying to impact, trying to affect, that those are outside of your control. So I wonder how that has affected, or what. So how do you think about employee experience? Because that has to be different for you guys than most shops in terms of when you're considering what that looks like and where you have agency to do something, to shape it. Can you unpack that a little bit?
Yeah, I think I can. When I think about employee experience, I think what I go to more often than not is the idea of just human experience, the idea that the intersection of professional and personal life, and one impacts the other, and so on and so forth. So how do we solve for that? And if we look at a framework like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right, and the idea of self-actualization as a company, what are the things that we are providing at each of these stages, right? So, and what are they? So certain components of this pyramid are demotivators, and certain components are motivators. So of course, the demotivator stuff, the survival things is, it's just compensation, benefits, the standard basics, table stakes, if you will, that an employer offers its employees. And then you get up into, building the engagement for the employee experience. And I believe it happens individually. It happens, uniquely, and that you have to address, what is the job to be done for each individual employee. So that's one of the ways that we started to look at this and saying, with each individual person that we have, they essentially hired us to do a job for them, right? It's the same way, Jason, if you went out and you purchased a jacket, if it didn't keep you warm, you're going to fire that jacket and go get a new one. So when someone comes to work for Synergy, they came here hiring us to do a job for them. Okay, so cool. A lot of that is compensation and benefits, call it your total rewards package. But I think there's an underlying element that we're not tracking, or that most organizations aren't tracking. And it's the unspoken. And this probably goes back a little bit to, working and having an organization that has a lot of men within it that aren't necessarily going to simply offer, those more maybe intimate needs that they have. And, we have to figure out how to get to them. How do we coach people up to trust, that we have their best interests in mind, and that we want to put the types of resources in place to help them with, again, that the idea of self-actualization is, as high of a reach as that might be, you got to reach for something, and that's what we're reaching for.
So I want to talk about one of the specific tactics, I guess, that you have employed within how you're doing this, because I think it's really, really interesting. And I think it actually has a broader application. I don't think you have to be in a federal government or a federal contracting situation for it to make a lot of sense, at least the more that I've reflected on it. So I'm interested to hear you kind of talk about this a little bit. But we talked when you and I were kind of figuring out what could we unpack here. You shared that you have internally, as I understand it, you used to have recruiters, and one of the things you've done is you changed the recruiter role to be what you call a people partner. And so I'd love to just start by you explaining what is a people partner and how is it different than a traditional recruiter?
Yeah, love it. Thanks for teeing that up, Jason. And this probably goes back to early career and some epiphanies I started to develop, back in the agency days and early, corporate recruiting days before I moved more into the HR side of the house. I think the epiphany that I had way back when was that, it's not that recruiting is a bad term, but I think it's just it's only part of the equation of what's really happening. The most trusted relationships within any organization that I've ever worked at is really recruiter and employee. In some cases, they've spent months. In our world, years. We've spent years, recruiting an individual. The amount of time spent, the amount of uncovering of, unique life challenges or circumstances or appreciation for family dynamics and all of these things, boil up over this time period. So then typically what happens is, you bring somebody in and they have an interview where they might meet with their potential manager for 30 minutes to an hour. The person decides that they're going to, join this company. It seems like a good opportunity. They're trusting the recruiter. The recruiter, closes the deal, brings them on board. We hand them off to the manager who doesn't know anything about them. The individual doesn't know anything about their manager. And you've got this weird dynamic of like, who are you? How should I act? So you have people showing up to work and they're approaching their job in ways that are, narratives that they created. And you've got managers that are looking at a person and maybe in their first week, they missed a day of work and they're like, oh my gosh, I made the wrong hiring decision. My employee called in because their cat was sick. Like, oh, come on. Well, the manager doesn't know if the cat is the only thing in this person's world, right? They don't know that. So they're making this snap judgment about, I made the wrong hiring decision. Meanwhile, the only thing this person has in their world is this cat, and it means a lot to them. So the transition from, just strictly recruiting and handing off to a part of the business and crossing your fingers that everything works out, I thought was a model that was a bit broken. So, the transition from recruiter into that of a people partner is taking that relationship and carrying it through their tenure within this organization. So they serve as a translator between manager and employee. And it's a symbiotic relationship. It's not that, the people partner is responsible for performance reviews and things of that nature. It's that this person is there to help translate the employee's needs with the manager and help translate, potentially the manager or leader's personality type and management style and such back to the employee, so that there's a greater appreciation for the dynamic and who people are and so on and so forth. So, everything from, I'll also say, when we look at the kind of hybrid recruiting HR approach, is I would categorize it as like your first responder in an accident. So the employee has a fender bender. They're not going to the emergency room. The first responder shows up and says, okay, you got a little bump or a bruise. We can take care of that here, and send them on their way. When they have a larger problem or a bigger issue, then it gets filtered back up into the emergency room, so to speak, which would be a traditional HR function that can help them run and solve for. So, I probably spend the next 2 hours talking to you about some of the, the stories and narratives, how we've helped employees go through this. But, turning it back to you to, dig in.
I just want to react to this for a second. I do want to hear a story or two, so I'm coming back to that in a second. But I want to react to, I think, this seems so obvious to me now that you've unpacked this, that, like the traditional model basically is it'd be the equivalent of you meet someone online and you start dating and you go through the courtship process, right? And you're getting to know each other and you're kind of trying to, like you're building that relationship and you're sorting out the good and the bad and are we a good fit or whatever. And then you decide like, yes, we want to be in a relationship. And so we're going to formally commit to one another. And so you do that. And then you schedule dinner like the next night to start your new relationship. And somebody else shows up at the dinner, not the person that you've been dating, right, but somebody else shows up. And you're like, what just happened? Like, you're not who you're not like, I knew you were like, I'd seen your face, but like, you're not the person. And so it makes a ton of sense to me that it's like, this is your person, right? That vouched for the organization, that vouched for you kind of was that. And so that is really fascinating to keep that connective tissue. So a couple quick questions, I guess, about the mechanics of this. Does the people partner then stay with that employee throughout the life cycle of their time with the organization?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So they maintain that relationship. So post-hire, how do you describe or sort of box the responsibilities of the people partner with that employee versus, so that it doesn't start to spill? Like, how do you put boundaries around it so it sort of stays in alignment with the intention that you have for the role?
Yeah. So I think the first thing is I try to remove the idea that it's a responsibility, right? I don't like the idea of someone, if it's not altruistically motivated and it feels like a people partner is just doing, the check-in that a manager might have on a regular basis, you're not going to get the good stuff, right? You're not going to get to the part where you can really have significant value in directing your people towards resources the company may have to help them solve for these problems. They're just not going to do it. Again, it's that trust and respect, care and feed of things. So I remove the idea that it's a responsibility. I position it more from the perspective of, how you might go about, your life and interaction across, friendships and other personal relationships, where if you get a funny meme or reel through Instagram, and you're firing it off, to your friend group because they're going to be entertained by it. Their sense of humor and that it's going to be entertaining to them. Same dynamic occurs, as people partners who are familiar with what's going on in the world and tech trends and things of that nature, or let's just say industry type news and just firing things off. Hey, did you hear about this, et cetera. So there is not a set of guidelines about how often, a people partner needs to reach out to a member of their team. Some people are like, they're going to put the brakes on and they're going to help control, the reality of it. And some people aren't going to lean in, Jason. It's just, the nature
Sure.
of the beast. Obviously, the old cliche, remark is, well, if you can impact just one person, it's worth it. So kind of keeping the guardrails on, so to speak, is training. It's education. It's helping the team develop a little bit better understanding for, let's just call it the psychology of humans, and making sure that they're developing, that you can come into a role and have empathy, but if you don't understand potential impacts of your input, your advice, dynamics of that nature, you could end up harming that relationship and
Sure.
dynamic. So in work, so mechanically, working as part of the relationship between, or translator and relationship between people partner and manager and employee in there, is making sure that you ask the employee for the permissions that you may need in order to elevate something, beyond that initial level. So there are some areas of this that, could get pretty hairy if you don't have the right people in the right seats. That being said, I have never run into an issue. So fingers crossed, knock on wood, whatever it is, we've never had an issue where somebody has overstepped a boundary, or broken trust because they revealed something they were said not to, what have you.
Sure. Can you think of a story that kind of really embodies what you sort of hoped you were creating when you went down this path? Can you give us an example of what that looks like?
Yeah, I have one as recent as last year, and it's a fun one. It's not one of the more I think tough ones that might involve family or personal dynamics. But we had someone join us last year, and it was the week of opening day week for baseball, and the employee had just started with us. A friend reached out to them and was like, hey, my company's got box tickets and I've got an extra ticket. Would you like to go? And the guy was like, man, I just started my new job. I'd love to, bummer, can't do it. Share the story with the people partner, and the people partner was like, are you kidding me? No, absolutely go. We're in full support of this. Your manager, would be upset if you didn't go, type deal. That is, one of those things, again, when we think about onboarding people and indoctrinating people into the organization, when you can have a success story like that within the first week or so of someone joining, it just sets the stage. It's like you're saying, if you went out on a date with somebody or what have you, and if it doesn't go well, it's not going to get a second date, but you get that first date in there, and it's a home run, pun intended. Mm-hmm. It just sets the relationship off on the right note. It sets the experience off of that person on the right note. All of the good things that come, with the employee experience fall into place. And
what's interesting to me, what strikes me too, is that especially in your situation, that people partner, those interactions are the culture of Synergy ECP to that individual.
That's right.
Right. They are the cultural expression or whatever. Right. And so that is particularly powerful. But I think that would be, that could be true in any environment, right? They could they're setting the tone, they're setting you've got to really make sure you got the right people in those roles and that they understand what their roles are. But like, that's a really powerful way to make culture real, like make it very like palpable for new employees, existing employees, and everybody in between.
Yeah, that's right. I'd love to, just take what you're saying as well outside of this, environment, this industry where we have our unique challenges. The same thing is true. We use a lot of, I guess, old expressions, but the expression of people don't leave, their employer, they leave their managers. You can get a lot of really good insight into managers, we'll say, ability to lead teams and grow teams and support the culture of an environment through your people when they feel empowered to share that information and that data, right? So it's not necessarily okay, we're just going to get rid of this people. Now you've got some data where you can layer on and say, all right, we have some coaching that we need to do over here, because if this person's having a problem, pretty sure that, the majority of the people on this person's team is having a problem. So elevating that, bubbling it up, gives us more data to impact things from top down and bottom up. It's just a formula that has worked extremely well. And by the way, I have done this outside of the federal landscape, and it works swimmingly. When you empower your employees with that, and I'll say it's the psychological safety. It's that psychological contract that somebody has with you as an employer, to feel compelled and safe to come and talk about the things that are impacting their day to day. And to me, that's what matters.
Yeah, this is what's coming up for me is it's interesting how organizationally we will provide, we want to provide HR business partners to the managers.
Right.
But we're not providing an HR people partner to the people. And the people are the measure of how effectively your experience or your management or your leadership is actually working. And I like, that is a really, really profound insight that, if you've got people partners that are building these relationships, if you have a new employee who's having a rough go of it with their new manager and they have someone they trust that they will talk to about that it gives you an early warning system where you can be like, hey, there's something going on here that we probably should be doing something about or looking into, so that you can, coach or you can do some kind of intervention before you lose the employee, which in a traditional sense, we don't even get the signal until the employee quits.
That's right. Yeah.
Or they go nuclear, right? One or the other. They're
That's
so
right.
tainted by the time you understand it's happening and you allow bad habits to go unchecked for so long that they become hard to change. So that's really powerful.
You connected the dots really well.
How would you say, how long ago did you do this, the change?
So here at Synergy ECP on the first day.
Okay.
So when I started February of last year, 2024, okay. I will say that one of the challenges, from that perspective is, it not being a startup organization. It's an established organization with lots of people in it. You then get into that change management component where you've got to get your people to buy into it. Yes, we're continuing to hire and continue to bring on more and more people. They're bought into this dynamic and the culture and all of those things. It's the people that are, on the ground today that you have to work towards pulling in and perhaps getting out of their comfort zone. So you work a little bit harder in that from that standpoint.
So what would you say about, it seems you're very bullish about it. It makes sense to me that it works. How do you know if it's working? Like, are there ways that you measure whether this strategy is having impact or not? Like, how do you know if it's having the impact that you desire?
Yeah. So in our world, Jason, one of the things that we measure or track and we're extremely engaged upon is what we call redeployments. So taking this back to, the work experience that our employees are having on other programs and contracts and things of that nature, at any given time, someone can, throw their hat into their ring and be like, I'm done with this. Like, I can't do this anymore. The dynamic of that people partner is, to your point, is an early warning system where we build the trust for people to come back in and say, things aren't going very well over here, and it's either this person or it's that person or it's the work, or I'm hearing that the contract is running out of money, or DOGE is happening and they're cutting these positions, and I'm worried about my livelihood. And then we map them into a redeployment status where we are actively looking for opportunities to redeploy these people. So measuring redeployments is one way that we can see that it's working, instead of getting resignations. So in absence of of the resignation, you get an opportunity to redeploy people across any one of your programs and salvage them. Word of mouth feedback, things of that nature. I'll be honest. This is probably a separate podcast subject for you, but it's the idea of surveys and surveying employees and how useful they are and things of that nature. We're not really doing that. We do have a lot of leadership interaction and connection with our employees, where we've been on what I call a little bit of a roadshow. So myself and the president have been going out and meeting with all of our team members in smaller groups and soliciting feedback in that way. So it's not the proverbial survey that somebody gets and it falls on potentially deaf ears. We're actually meeting with them individually, pulling in their feedback directly. So we can measure from that standpoint. And then just the numbers. So one of the things that each person is tracking, each people partner is tracking, essentially it's, to use a sports analogy, developing baseball cards on each individual person, right? So we know the things that are impactful to them, that are important to today. And that, like a baseball card, the stats are going to change every year based on the needs of that person, whether they're junior to mid-level or senior and retiring in place or what have you. So the more baseball cards that we get filled out and the more data we're able to collect to continue building out that baseball card shows us the overarching dynamic of the power of what we're doing.
It's really, really interesting work. I really appreciate you being willing to share that and kind of unpack it and how it works, because I think it's a really, if I was sitting in an HR leadership seat right now, this would really be challenging to me to step back and think about, are we leveraging kind of the relationships and our systems and processes in the right way to really, align around the experience we're creating for people. And especially in that first, I can see an argument that at some point the relationship transitions, if I've been here for a year, maybe the recruiter transitions you to some point and then hands you off to someone who's more of a longer term relationship manager internally. But it is really, it's a very intentional approach to relationship management with employees that also lifts some of the sort of almost unwieldy burden that we put on managers, right? Managers are supposed to be all things, everything to every employee.
Yeah.
And, having that sort of other relationship that is a stabilizer for them helps kind of de-emphasize that one point of contact being so vital too. And at least I would think that it's kind of like you're creating now a three-legged stool, which is a lot easier to balance than two.
Yeah.
And so,
and I will say, and I'll be the first to admit here, and I'm sure listeners, viewers, will be sitting there and saying, well, that's great for a 200-person company, but we have 5,000 people, and I don't have enough team to do this. So you're absolutely right. From a scale perspective, it's not tested, and to your exact point of at some point the handoff needs to happen. Agree. But from an indoctrination, assimilation standpoint of getting people into the organization and operating on all cylinders, sooner rather than later, I think it's hard to argue against.
Yeah. Well, and I also wonder, though, sometimes I think the resource allocation piece is a cop-out, because organizations all over the world have big employee relations departments.
Yeah.
Who do little to relate to employees, right? Their job is writing rules and firing people and dealing with problems. They're not building relationships and managing that. So I wonder if we just fundamentally rethought or sort of reconnected to the purpose
Sure.
of some of these things, there's opportunities there. So I'm not going to let people off the hook that easily, because
I appreciate that.
if it works in small organizations, generally show us the future of what's possible, right?
That's
because
right.
you can do it faster and experiment, but then we got to just figure out how to scale it. I think
That's
there's an
right.
opportunity.
The other argument as well is, well, I want recruiters recruiting, and if they're bifurcated as far as their roles are concerned, they're not focused on recruiting and building pipelines and things of that nature. And the pushback is, well, guess what rises with this? Employee referrals. The better relationship that has there, the better experience somebody has with the organization and such, the more willing they are to reach out to their friends and share, how great things are going.
For sure. And we could parse out all kinds of,
that's right.
Like I grew up when I was on the inside, the organizations where I was leading HR were high volume hiring, call center and debt collection world. And, when you're hiring, big classes of people, like one recruiter might be hiring 12 people a week.
Sure.
The reality is that's not a sustainable, the same model's not going to work.
That's right.
You're going to have to evolve and think about it more broadly and think about it a little differently. So like we could go down that rabbit hole, but I think it's not losing the intent. It's the
Correct.
idea and the intent of it that I think is really, really powerful. So thank you. Thank you for sharing this. This has been so fun to learn about how you're doing this.
Yeah, I appreciate your interest. This is great.
I have to ask you the question I ask everybody at the end of the conversation, because I'm a futurist, or armchair futurist, I guess I'd call myself. I love kind of getting people's take on what they hope the future will hold, or what they're trying to shape and manifest. And so when you think about work 5 years from now, what's one thing, and I say work, capital W work broadly for human beings.
Okay, yeah, love that.
5 years from now, what is one thing you hope will be different about work than it is today?
Balance. I think balance, that people feel more inspired to have greater balance in their life and emphasize and prioritize wellness. I think we have a tremendous amount of pressure put on hours worked and hours that you're seen and all of that great stuff. And I think the emphasis needs to be on productivity and being able to put systems in place that allow you to justify productivity without necessarily looking at somebody's time card and seeing whether they work 10 hours, 12 hours a day. So I'm going to go with balance.
I like it. All right, Ross, we're at the end. So that means we're at the closing checkout here. So what's one word that describes how you are feeling as we wrap up our conversation today?
One word. Okay, this is pressure. And because I want to do the conversation justice, Jason. So this one word has got to be, I think, it's got to carry the weight of how I'm feeling. So that's where the pressure comes into play. I didn't score very well on my SATs. So the vocabulary is not necessarily where it might need to be. But I think I'm going to cheat a little bit, and I'm going to point over my shoulder here and say inspired. So thank you for helping with the inspiration and helping me reconnect to the work that we're doing. And it's always great to hear the feedback where people are seeing the value and relating with it. So thank you for that.
It's my pleasure. My one word is titillated.
I love it.
Anytime I hear like an idea that I think is a good idea that disrupts the status quo in the best kind of ways, I get kind of all tingly. And this is one of those moments. So thank you for the work you're doing and leading the way, Ross. I am inspired by the work you're doing, and I'm excited to share it with people. So thank you for that. This was an awesome conversation. If people want to connect with you, where's the best place for them to do that?
Yeah, I think probably the easiest way to do that is via LinkedIn, Ross Hecox, RossHecox. I think there actually are two of us in the world, which blew my mind. And one of us is a cowboy and one of us isn't. And I'll let the guests figure out which one is the cowboy and which one isn't.
We're leaving with a mystery. We're leaving with a mystery. I like that. So we will. I'll throw your LinkedIn or a link to your LinkedIn profile in the show notes. So if they don't want to go find it on their own, they can take all the mystery and fun out of it and just click on it and go straight there if they want to connect. So Ross, thank you so much.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
And thank you for listening. I hope that this conversation has challenged you to rethink maybe or to sort of broaden your take on what a recruiter could be, right? Could you evolve to people partner approach? What would it mean to sort of invest the same kind of intention in partnering with employees as we do partnering with managers and business leaders? I think that's a really profound invitation for us to all take from Ross forward. And so take that, go back, make some changes, make some waves, mix things up, and please remember to check in with those who matter the most to you. Might be the most important thing you do today. Until next time.